This is the narrative that we want to live out. Why? Because it's in all of our stories. But why is it in our stories? Because it's accessible. All of the Disney stories, all of them, whether it's Finding Nemo. I mean, every has elements of all this stuff. Whatever's impossible is possible. And what are you going to have to do to get it? Well, you're going to have to dig down real deep and find a hero somewhere. Is it going to be a champion? Is anybody going to know about it? No, probably not. But it's going to be great for you. It's going to be great for your family. Are you getting anything from this? Does this make sense on any level? Or?
It does make sense. Last time we spoke, we were talking about the relational value that this could have. Like a couple of weeks ago, because of work, we were at you could call it workshop for leadership and many other things. And they were segmenting two types of victory. The victory of private victory, as they call it, which is the one over yourself, when you find your inner value, when you feel capable, when you find meaning. And then the public victory, which is where you have such a strong foundation with yourself that you can make those connections and actually accept synergy between you and other people. So I believe that for this pattern that we have in the people writing our stories, because these stories are just not telling themselves. There's people behind them writing them. So the people who are telling our stories are the stories that we are consuming, whether that is the movies or like books or anything. Why are they using that? Like, why are we so focused on what we call the private victory? And why are we so not so focused on what will be the relational victory? You said something very, very pretty at the end, which would be great for yourself. Probably nobody's going to notice, but I wouldn't say nobody's going to notice. It could be great for yourself, and then you said it could be to your family, to your friends. And I believe that it shouldn't be a quest for victory. It should be a quest for meaning. And in the quest of meaning, not just like meaningful to me, because like it would be like very selfish, and heroes are sometimes portrayed as selfless. But the victory that I have over myself and my feelings and my emotions, and the joy that brings when I can relate to others from a healthier place, the joy that brings to my mom, to my dad, to my siblings, to my couple, to my friends. I believe that we are the most social species on Earth. We are highly dependable on each other. When this COVID situation has put us in a place where we're like, I need to connect with something other than Zoom, and I'm going crazy. So I believe that there is a lot of value in connection. So those identity quests, as I like calling them, like finding the hero in you, those identity quests can also be a search for meaning, and meaning allows not just like victory over myself, but allows you to connect. And it raises the awareness that I'm the awareness against entitlement, which is I'm the only person in the world. I'm entitled to be happy. But as I'm looking for my own identity, I forget that there's people around me who are also impacted by my actions that I'm screwing over. So I believe awareness has to come like on both sides, not just self-aware, but generally aware that you're not the only human being who's striving to be happy, that there's people around you. So that's in the hero narrative. I don't think we use language on our side enough to point out that, oh, the hero is so great. That's a story that we tell. But we probably don't say heroes are not self-made. They had people around that. They connected. They did network. They found help. They didn't put themselves in their place. Yes, they are the ones who finally sacrificed and whatever. But I believe we should perceive ourselves or change the narrative of our stories into we grow as community rather than just beings. And if you think that it's a more European model than an American one. In America, including South America, we're like self-made. When we're raising our children, we tell them, hey, watch out, because like the world sucks and so does life, and people are out to get you, so you need to stand for yourself, right? If you can help, okay, go help, but not to a point where you're helpless. Like, you don't want that. As in Europe, it's like a conversation that it's more turned into How can I help? If today I'm helping someone, tomorrow I'll receive it. Like that part where the world reorganize itself, we live with that anxiety, not so much for them. And you can see that in conversations too, where language takes a primary place. We are debaters in America. Like when you explain a point, people usually go like, I agree, I disagree. That's their opening line. Like we think life is binary and it goes with agreements and disagreements. As to how about conversations?
Right.
We're not thinking synergy. We're thinking who's right and who's wrong. Right. Whereas if we change the narrative, we could think with our different takes, what could we build together? It's not a matter of being right or wrong. It's what else is there that we haven't thought of that we could create together. And I think there's a lot of perspective in that.
I think you can actually personalize that too. Internalize that, I mean. Because there's that voice in your head that says automatically, that's too bright, that's too dark, I'm too tall, I'm too short, I wish I had this kind of hair, wish I had that. I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I'm not strong enough, rich enough, whatever the enough is, the sufficiency conversations, that everything is met with something is wrong here. So there's a context, right? So there could be a conversation that someone could have with themselves. Well, let's just have a conversation about this rather than meeting it with something's wrong here. Let's talk about it. Let's work it out. And even on an internal type level where we actually talk to the voice in our head.
Yeah, agreed.
Said, okay, chill out. Let's find a solution here. And for me, it happens with gratitude. It happens in the context of humility and knowing that I don't know everything. And I'm never going to know everything, but I'm grateful for what I do know. And I thank God every day for my brain. God put in me a brain that can figure things out. And I like it. And do I take credit for the brain? Sure, because I have my choices, but mostly it's just in the context of not being arrogant and saying everything is wrong in the world. It's just, inviting you guys over to actually have a conversation. The reason I love conversations with David, because he doesn't agree with me. And we work things out rather than just, well, see you later.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's got to be that working through, because people do have their different perspectives and different viewpoints. That's actually why I've been talking to some that, I've been trying to listen to you guys a little bit about this hero narrative. And, but yeah, I get it. I think that's really cool. Curious, you asked me about the 7+1 and 6+1. Was that in that workshop, or was that part of a workshop you guys?
No, that's a separate workshop that I'm creating.
Okay.
More than a workshop, it is a 2-week training for supervisors, so that we can bring them in and kind of like build on the values and the things that we want for the company. Like I believe like part of our work of our job is task work, like what needs to be done at what time, what are the deadlines. But if you only focus on task work, then there's no meaning. So we want to make training meaningful, and I believe that people want to grow professionally sometimes, but we don't often realize that our personal growth needs to go along with our professional development. Like you can be an amazing manager if you hate yourself and everybody. Like you're just gonna be a cunt. So we're working on developing that human side. And sometimes people have goodwill, they just don't know how. Like they want to be better, they want to for themselves, for the people around them, they just don't know how, they don't know where to start. So and in our job, I love it, but it's pretty stressful. It's very, very stressful. And I think I like this environment because it's pushed me to grow, like personally.
Yeah.
So there are very stressful situations with people screaming at you, and you have to be very self-aware and do that little pause where you're like, this person is yelling at me, but in order to engage in a fight, I would need to engage. So number 1, don't. Number 2, like doing that self-analysis where you're like doing the pause and like, why is this upsetting me? What part of me haven't I yet healed that I'm still getting triggered by this? Right. So everybody's discomfort around you is just a reflection of this stuff that you still need to heal, or that you started healing, but you need like some improvements to make, some work to be done. So I believe that language brings connection. I believe that through language we could get like either scale fights or we could solve them. We could either engage in debate or conversations. So a lot of the training is focused on how do we communicate. First, what do we listen? Who tells our stories? What are we hearing? And then how we communicate. How can we help someone who is feeling depressed? Because like I hate this view, and this is not until recently that I like found some authors and I really got very fond of their work. They're like, how many times have you been told, leave your personal shit like at the door and then come to work? And that's freaking impossible. Like, because you were raised in a family and so unconsciously that's how you learn to relate to other people. So as soon as you pass the door, that knowledge of others is not going to go away. It's going to go with. Another thing is that corporations want their people to be emotionally intelligent, but they still haven't defined what emotional intelligence is. So they think it's like swallow up and like don't feel, like Elsa from Frozen, conceal, don't feel, don't let them see. And it's like, no, that's not emotional intelligence. So feel your shit, process your shit, but make sure that while you're at it, you're not harming anybody else. So I think that's it. I'm very interested in creating better relationships around me. And that has motivated me to create a better relationship with the voice that we have in our head when we tell that we suck, that we're horrible or whatever. I'm like, if I want to love, I don't believe we hear it a lot. Love yourself, then love somebody else. But I believe they can happen simultaneously. Like they happen at the same time. So while you're loving yourself, you're giving better love to somebody else. Or because you were shown kindness, then you were able to see it for you. I think it happens like simultaneously.
Right. I get that. That's perfect. In the gratitude, I think I have a little section on emotional intelligence. Like people who share gratitude and are grateful, you automatically assume that, not assume, you label them as being emotionally intelligent because they're interacting and they're not arrogant. They're like, they're getting into your world. You're being vulnerable, connecting with you because there's no other perfect way to connect across social barriers or even class breaks and just look at somebody in the eye and say, thank you. Everywhere it's kind of expanded. Everywhere I eat now finishes up, I go to the counter and I look at people and say gracias and I wave my hand and I leave. But I'm actually grateful that, and I don't know what the experience is like for them because they may have that all day long. Maybe like the bus driver that gets gracias 100 times a day or 1,000 times a day from people getting off the bus, but never gets it. Because this is
becomes part of the landscape.
Right. No, exactly. And for this culture specifically, it's already part of the landscape. We tell people gracias when we want them to fuck off. When they're coming up to us with candy and whatever gracias means, go away, I guess, right? Because that's what people say when they want people, the beggars, to go away. Gracias. All right. Okay. And they understand, okay, time to go. So maybe redefine gracias to really mean thank you. But
that's what I love about language, because it's not really about the word itself, but the meaning that's attached to it.
Yeah. No, exactly right.
Like, and that happens with our body language as well. Maybe doing something with your eyes or a facial expression to you means something, but for that person meant something completely different. Like we read social interactions through the lenses of our own stories, of our previous interactions, of our previous background.
Right.
And changing that, or at least understanding that through language, I can explain my worldview and I can get yours, and then we can meet somewhere halfway or create new knowledge that we didn't or we hadn't thought of. I think that's great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's how things get invented, like iPhones. And that's how big stuff, groundbreaking things. I mean, sure, somebody thinks of it, but they got to have their company, their team or whatever. What are you getting out of all this, David?
Oh, quite a lot. I'm enjoying my time here.
All right.
I'm sometimes get stuck in certain parts of the conversation. So I go and think a little bit of that and then come back. Right. That's pretty much been my right here. So,
well, even go back to earlier parts of the conversation if you had some triggers going on.
One in particular, because of course, I always get stuck in the language part of it and communication. And well, Jani talks a lot about relationships, relational interactions, relational ways of doing things. And then you're part of a part that really interested me was when you mentioned, and correct me if I'm not getting it correctly, the higher ideal that's beyond everything else, that's unnameable, right? It can't be named because
right.
So I kept thinking of that part and then feed it with the rest of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of the meaning of the ideal or good that cannot be named. So in the Bible and in Voldemort, in Harry Potter series, right? So sort of two parts of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, well, it's in that.
Kinda, yeah. It's
Yeah.
I mean, both are archetypes,
I don't know where
expressions
J.K.
of the
Rowling got
archetype.
her creativity, but just like there's so much.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could talk about that forever. About Harry Potter and the Christ, the Messiah image is just
Yes.
so much. It's, the humble servant. There's so much.
Yeah, a lot of it.
It really reflects that.
Oh,
So, in the Bible, God couldn't be named like in the Old Testament. God couldn't be named, but it was a cannot as an imposition. You must not do it, right? And as well as in Harry Potter, right? You must not
name.
name. I mean, say the word, say the name, right? But I think that in the broader story, in the archetype, the cannot is an impossibility.
Yeah.
And this is when it struck me when you explain like late abortion, genocide, it cannot be named, but it's not that you must not name it. You have to name it actually, because if you never have the conversation, the reality doesn't go away just because you don't name it or you don't talk about
In
it.
fact, it's the naming of it that gives you power over it. Like you relating last time we talked about your abuse.
Mm-hmm.
That it has to be named
It
sometime.
has to be named for it to get real, feel real.
and to get over, or not to get over, to process it, to recognize it and say, oh, there were characters in that story, and I was one of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How but before that, it wasn't nameable. It was there and always there, probably every minute of the day it was there, but until you could name it and then have some type of power over it. So there's that too. It's like there's those things in our life that are unnameable because we can't confess it. We don't want to go there with our brains. It hurts so bad or whatever it is that we just.
That's an interesting take to that.
Yeah.
So adding to that as so they cannot be named as in that, for example, in talking about in speaking about trauma, and speaking about the higher idea and incredible evil, right? Like despicable evil that makes you puke, makes you pass out, right? Or you die for it. I think that happens because it's such a great and complex situation. Trauma, higher idea, terrible evil. It's just so complex. And this is how I think of it. So name something. What's a name? A name, it's basically just a term or a word. And a word in general, but a name, it is a word. So let me explain a concept, where I'm coming from with this one. In linguistics, you have the word and the meaning that's attached to it, right? So the signifier and the significance, and the meaning and signifier, right? So that's early linguistics.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the word tree and the idea that comes to your mind with tree, right? So tree is a word that can sort of, what's the word? Like hold or contain the meaning of word of tree. Even if you don't know every tree, it's sufficient to the meaning that it has. But a higher ideal, it's just so complex and so difficult to understand. And because it's beyond everything that you know, you don't have the tools. Your mind doesn't have the tools. And we as a community don't have the tools, would never have the tools to get there, because it's by definition impossible to understand and to hold. So I think that's the cannot is an impossibility of naming it, because no word could actually hold all of that meaning, right? And actually gives you, because communication through language, I mean, a word or anything, a name works when if I have a concept in my mind, then I use that word, and you hearing that word takes you to the same concept. That's how communication is possible. But even if say that I can actually understand and have in my mind the whole complexity of a higher ideal, right? And then I put a name to it. But then that name doesn't mean the same concept to you because you don't have it in your mind.
Right.
Because we have never named it and talked about it. And that's my point at the end. They're talking about it. So as I'm not able with that name to sort of ignite or spread that concept in your mind, then there's no communication, and that's how we call it a higher idea. Just think of it as a thing that you don't know, but nobody really knows it, and that's no way to define the thing. It's not through what it isn't.
Yeah,
But
It's just a part of it, but it's not the whole action of defining.
A little light like just pop up when you were describing that, and the reason why Harry was not scared to name Voldemort is because though it is the same word, to him it didn't have the same meaning. To everybody else, it's unspeakable evil, and to Harry was the dude I fucking met who killed my parents who I want to get back at. So that I believe is an entirely different take, and he had that meaning assigned to it because of his story, which was completely different and more personal in relation to that word than to everybody else's.
There's another aspect to the Harry Potter story that, for me, gives a little more access of Harry Potter to Voldemort, is that a scar on his head that every time Voldemort comes in, starts feeling pain, right? Like there's a passageway through that scar into his soul that can feel the evil, direct evil of that which is unnameable. So because of his relationship, not only from an event that happened in the past, but his ongoing
connection,
even connection with that pure evil, that he was able to name that because there was that connection. I don't know if that even is possible.
But that now it makes total sense, because like whether it is because of previous story or whether it is because of current connection, because of his life's experiences, past and current, he had assigned a completely different meaning to the word.
Exactly. And I think that's how this unnamables and unnamability is just lack of interaction with that reality. But it's hard to interact with this unnamables reality because they are difficult and complex, and they need time for you to engage with them, and you don't know what you're going to find there because they are unnameable up to that point. So you haven't had the chance to know about it because it was unnameable, right? You're naming it. You're in the process of being able to name it. So I think that unnamability is just lack of visitation, lack of going there.
I think immediately of the world being flat because we didn't go there.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's just the beyond. It's nothing is a nothing, but that nothing is just you're defining it by what it isn't, which is the reality. Yeah. And then the rest of it is just, you can't think of it. But then you go there and somebody invents the telescope and look at the stars, and now you can name it. And now you have an idea of it. So now we're not just looking up to the edge of the world, of the flat world, but now we're looking at the universe. Where's the edge of it? And then what's beyond that? Well, we don't know. And that's stressful. So I think that's what happens with the higher ideals, like these people that wrote the Bible and all of it, right? Think of before the Bible, even I would say that putting in writing the prophecies was like, no, that's terrible because that's a name, that's unheard of. But then you write it, people start engaging in the conversation, studying it, using it to create laws. I mean, regardless of how it plays out,
right?
You are having a conversation. So then you are more able to name the complexity of Christianity or
even dealing with it on an emotional level. I believe the unknown triggers a lot of anxiety because we've been taught generation after generation that the unknown is something that you have to be very scared of. When in reality, we have never, I don't remember as a kid being taught that the unknown and strangers and that stuff could be fun and could also be safe.
Exactly. And I think we end up, because of that, relying on these explorers, and I would say that heroes as well. Part of the hero idea
Structure.
is just people who are not afraid of the unknown, and that comes to I think this Harry Potter idea of the hero is just so. Then again, we have an unknown that's a higher idea that we could not get there because we don't know how to, but we need to strive for it. But then at the same time, the whole society or the whole story is telling us to go apart from that unnamable evil because you don't know what it is, and it's so terrible that you could never overcome it or
right.
beat it, right? But then the hero is just not afraid of facing that evil, not only existing with it, naming it, but going towards it. And I think that Harry Potter thing is just he had something to talk about Voldemort that was not the story of the unnamable, the evil, right? No, this is this guy. I know how he looks like. This happened with me, so that is a conversation in itself. That's another story. That's not just the impossible to attain or impossible to beat, but something different to talk about it. And I think trauma is dealt with in the same way. The first part of it is you being able at least to discuss it. So I want to wrap up the unnamability.
More than discuss it.
No, but
because first you name it for yourself, and there's a time before you're actually able to engage in discussion.
Love that I think that these realities are so complex that name is just one word or a couple of words, right? So your name is Eric, and that has you, right? David, Jani, and that's sufficient to ignite in someone the concept of who you are, not in a philosophical way, but just the idea of the person, right? But these realities have a name to them already, like genocide. It has a name, apparently. But it is impossible for someone to actually have a conversation it is impossible for someone to communicate what it means to them with just the word if you don't have a conversation, because we all have different backgrounds. So for example, a victim or a survivor of not a victim because they couldn't talk, but a survivor of genocide, saying the word genocide to another person that has not gone through it would be impossible with just the word compel the other person to have that same concept.
Like someone from Auschwitz,
for instance, right?
And talking about it, like I can talk about it day long, but they can't because
memories.
Right, but then the only way for them to name it, the people who know about it, is talking about it.
Yeah. Because
naming them is not assigning a name to it, but giving the other person what I understand by that. Right?
Selective mutism after trauma.
Well, it's kind of like what Solzhenitsyn did after the Russian problems. So horrific. And he was, just for some reason he had the strength to write about it and shared and just totally turned the country upside down. Russia totally turned the culture upside down by sharing his conversation.
Exactly. Same thing with Viktor Frankl, right?
Yes.
So these people, what are they doing is naming, is defining a name that already exists, but you don't know what it is. You use it, but you don't know what it is. So if you don't know what it is, you use it for just whatever thing. For instance, say you don't speak my language. Then you come into my house. Well, this will be quite the opposite situation.
Yeah.
But I don't speak your language, right? And we sort of coexist here. And you, at some point, use the word frackle. I don't know what that is. I just heard you. When we were in the table, it was frackle. And then I start assigning that to whatever works for me. It's like, maybe that's a frackle. Maybe we sitting here is frackling, whatever, right? So we can have sort of a conversation. If I point at it and I say frackle, then you say, whoa, that guy names it that way. It means nothing to me. It meant nothing to you at the beginning. It was just a sound. But then we can sort of talk about it. But someone who actually knows what this is and comes at us and explains that ignites a conversation about it. So I think with these people telling their stories, and when you deal with trauma, when you engage with the therapist and talk and visit it and explain how it felt, and it's not the part before naming it. That's the naming.
Yeah.
That's when you assign a whole significance
When you
to
say it
it,
out
meaning
loud.
to it, right? And you can actually, when you say, this happened to me when I was a child, then you're naming it, and it was possible, not because you could say the words, but because now you have a meaning assigned to it, and you can live with that. Well, that's a different thing. You could not live with that, but you named it.
Yeah.
And you had the courage to go into the
So
unknown.
exactly, it's going into the unknown, and then I started to understand the unknown, what's inside that, not just a whole bunch of things that are too big for me to ever get, because nothing. I think, and this is my biggest difference with your or disagreement, so to speak, with the main idea of the book, is that something is too big. It's beyond understanding. I don't think it's just a no yet, as of now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you need to go there. You need to visit. You need to strive to know the good and actually go to the back. Not
I'm
Can understand
I'm
it.
reminded a little bit of you guys' relationship. I mean, that was launching out into the unknown, terrifying.
Yes.
And there's still so much more to know that you don't even know.
Yeah.
And someday you'll know a little bit more. But if you ever get to the place where you just know everything about your relationship, time to move on. You know, it's like, okay, there's nothing new to know about you. See ya. You know, I mean, we do get bored or whatever, but you have to actually put work into a relationship to still make the unknown still out there.
Mhm.
Like
And
there's
to
more.
create unknownness.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a not only beauty but the necessity
Yeah.
of the unknown. So I think there's also, like for us, there's a necessity that God remains unknown,
Mhm.
so that there's more. Because everybody puts God into the box. He's called you. He's called you. He's called me. Everybody on the planet is their own God. Well, what good is that?
Yeah.
There's nothing unknown about God because we're all Him or her or it. So that's the beauty of the mystery of maybe old text or something like, wow, I didn't see this before, or it could mean this. Wow, the tree does contain this, but it's also mentioned in the Garden of Eden. It's also reflected on what Jesus died on. People refer to that as the tree that Jesus died on. So there's a perception is reality, but we just got to put it into language and find agreement with that language to make the reality bigger.
Finding
But
agreement.
think of it though. We do need the unknown, and we do need to look for it, right? Or know that there's something more, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what meaning is, knowing that it is bigger than this that I'm doing here. Me working in a company
And realizing
is not just a
impact.
paycheck, right? It has an impact. So there's something bigger, right? But I think that the necessity, we need the unknown, put that way, I mean, you need to give it a twist, because if not, you're just gonna stand there.
Mm-hmm.
So the unknown can remain unknown, right? But that's dying. I think that's dying. And I think that's paralysis
Yeah.
Agreed.
to still have an unknown. That's anxiety, because you start thinking that every time you need anything, you're eating out the unknown. And so you want to remain blind and to remain here, never to go there. So I love traveling, but every time I travel, then that's a less unknown point. So at some point I'm gonna run out of places. So I'll end up in that way of thinking. You will end up being agoraphobic. You will not leave your house to still have something to look for in the future to travel, but you never travel. And I think the unknown actually works the opposite. So think of knowledge as a whole, right? Every time you travel, you learn about a new place. And you can visit every place in a city. So you went to that city, but when you went uphill, then you saw a lot of little streets that you didn't know that you didn't know about. So that's you going there, didn't eat out the unknown, it actually made it bigger. There's more things that you now know that you don't know, right? And I think science works the same. So before we didn't know that there was a microscopic world. Then we invite the microscope and you say, we're eating a whole bunch of the unknown, But then you start going into it. It's like there's so much to it. So bacteria, wow, we'll never get all of it. Wow, now we have viruses. Wow, that's a whole new word, right? So instead of eating the unknown, going towards it makes it bigger. So I think that's how you keep moving on forward in your crave of the unknown. You go to it, and then the unknown tells you, I'm bigger than you thought of me before. Then you go into that bigger and it tells you back, I'm bigger than what you previously knew about me.
Do you feel like that's what it means to be human?
No, because you can be human and be stuck.
Because animals do the same thing, kind of. They go into the unknown and they go exploring and go bigger places, basically.
Not necessarily. There are
Some
animals
right.
with tons of fear
Right.
that they can deal and that prevents them from the unknown. For instance, my dog. She was very scared of people, and if she hadn't engaged in a program and in her own type of therapy, and if she hadn't made her own decisions to be different, probably they don't have like the same verbal language that we have to name things. But if she hadn't made that decision, she would still be way too frightened to do everything that she now is capable of. So even in animals, we see that some of them need to make that decision. To me, it struck very, very hard back in 2018 when I started studying animals, and I realized they make decisions. I was like, what the fuck? I thought that was a human thing. And then I was like, okay, but we are capable of language. And then I realized they also do that. And then I was like, yeah, but they're not capable of nonverbal. Turns out some of them even are not able to speak, but to be able to discriminate and understand freaking everything, and to understand even complex sentences. Like there is an entire, a very famous border collie that named Chaser that was not only able to memorize like 1,000 to 2,000 words, but she was able to understand complex sentences with a subject, a verb, and an object, with no mistake, meaning that it was not a memory thing, it was a cognitive thing that she was able to do and tasks and all of that. So as they make decisions and they experience fear, I believe that what I know animals are even more human than humans.
Oh yeah.
So
right.
It depends on the meaning that you assign to human.
Yeah,
to me, humans, it comes with a set of values rather than with a condition. So yeah, I talked about this once.
We sort of.
Yeah, I used to be so fascinated with my dog Jake was just.
Yeah.
How does he know which customers are which?
Yeah.
And then like this border collie out here from half a block away will see me and start wagging his tail, and I'm a block away. Dogs they have eyesight, but they're not amazing eyesight.
Yeah.
But there's something about me that he knows. So it's like, yeah, wow. So I guess, but I also would think, okay, how much of myself have I imprinted onto my dog?
Yeah.
And then how much of this is he acting out of instinct for, survival, pleasure, pain, whatever it is that dogs do to live, like I had to beat him sometimes when he'd come back home after rolling in dead deer carcasses with this slimy, stinky stuff all over him that he thought was cologne. And twice, that was all it took. And then he figured out that I didn't like him that particular, I just didn't like having to bathe him with that on it, with these larvae or whatever.
In there.
Yeah. So, right. So, but I also think, okay, well, that's me sometimes too. Like I think, I'm this way and that way, and I roll around in dead things and expect people to like me. No, I gotta stay away from the dead things.
Yeah.
So, so he actually taught, there's a lot of lessons to learning that too, but I still don't understand. I mean, I just understand the difference. Dogs can't have this detailed of a conversation.
No, they can't.
And they can't, any animal can't feel the level of responsibility that humans have. That there's a gift of responsibility that I think at the level that only we can teach animals that looks like responsibility, how to clean up or do that or not poop inside but poop outside. I mean, there's some triggers we can do, but they're not taking it as a responsible measure for their life. But yeah, I don't know. I still don't know, but I do know that there's something special about us, and we've got, I mean, even the perception of the word hero, I assume that everybody's got the same perception of the word hero.
Mm-hmm.
So I invited you guys here tonight to actually explore that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So because there's got to be an agreement with hero. Well, heroes don't mean some things, and it means other things.
Mm-hmm.
So where does it come out? Well, it comes out in every story that we spend money on, because every writer or storyteller needs to make sure that person listening is going to get their money's worth, or it's going to be worth sitting through all of that just to get the end of it. Like, that's why we don't like bad endings. Well, they do happen. Romeo and Juliet. Big, powerful, whatever, moneymaker, but it still has this crazy ending. They die. It's like, or what? Romeo dies, right? Or what's?
They both die.
They both die because it's like, oh no, I killed the now I have to die. Yeah, they both die, right? So, not a great ending. And even the story of Jesus doesn't have a great ending. It's like he dies, and he dies in a lot of different ways. But but there is that story of Groot, Groot and we want resurrection. We want that. We want that hero to die, just like Batman. And the last night flies off and the thing blows up, but he actually has on autopilot, but nobody knows, so he's actually dead. In agreement, but he's not. So, but everybody perceives that he gave his life because he was perfectly willing to give his life to protect Gotham City, and flies off toward the end of this whatever he made that blows up. Which one was that? Anyway, all of them, right? You could name that for any superhero, because Superman dies too, and then there's resurrection. We always need the resurrection. I don't know. Do we? Yeah, I think we need to know that there is going to be some kind of not happily ever after.
I want to believe in transcendence, and resurrection means that it's possible for you to transcend.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking of other movies that don't necessarily end up so well, like shit happens, but then their work impacts other people's lives. So then they're a hero, even if they don't have necessarily their resurrection. Like their form of resurrection becomes their legacy, their written work, that novel that they did, the people that they helped. Which brings me back to Coco, like the movie. Like, nobody ever dies if someone is there to remember. That concept, I think it's very beautiful.
Coco.
Because, your afterlife.
The Book of Life?
No.
You call it the Book of Life? No, it's not.
No. It's a different movie. It's called Coco in English.
Okay.
It's an animated movie from a couple of years ago from Mexico, Mexican culture, and the Day of the Dead.
It's from Disney, so.
Not from Disney?
It is.
From Disney. So, it's a kid that visits the realm of the dead, and things happen to him. And, it's basically based
it sounds
on
like the Book of Life.
Mexican.
Because that's kind of what he does, too. He has to go off into the land of it. But, there's transcendence and coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and legacy. There is transcendence and legacy.
Right.
That is their form of resurrection.
Right.
Yeah.
So I believe, my thing with the hero take is that I think that at some point, if it's way too self-centered, it turns out to be a little bit, or it could be perceived as a little bit narcissistic. Like the hero, the maker. I still love the entire analogy. I would just focus on fighting against the concept of self-made, because no hero is self-made. Like the kid from Coco, he had family. Jesus had a bunch of people around him. The disciples were helping. Harry Potter had great friends that helped him become who he could.
Yeah.
And even when he was a jackass, he had people to remind him, hey, you're being a total asshole. And you're like, shit, right, I need to correct this. So we are in interactions all the time, and they give us feedback on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Every person we meet becomes a teacher, either on what I admire and I want to incorporate in my life, or hell to the fucking no, I don't want those practices in my life. So then you become aware of what to do and what not to.
Yeah.
And then you stop being an automatic pilot all the time, just reacting to whatever comes, but being a little bit more aware on how would I respond. Every response and every feeling becomes, at the end, a decision.
Yeah.
And I believe finding the hero in you is making decisions that don't only go well for you, but that they have an impact on others. We know it, and that's like built into the word for us because that's the meaning we have assigned to it. Even though the three of us have completely different backgrounds, even different countries, we have assigned the same meaning to the word hero. But take it, we want to give a message across, and if while we're explaining that message, we assume that everybody else is going to say, oh, hero means this, and heroes are not self-made, then if they do think they are, we are not necessarily delivering the message that connection also makes you find the hero in you. Recognizing somebody else's achievements and being truly happy and grateful for them, even if they're not your own, that's when you find the hero in you. When you do service to others, not just when you're able to overcome your own shit. That's great, and that works for like your own self process. But heroes make social impact. Jesus, Harry Potter, whatever they did, also help other people and help them in the process.
Well,
Yeah. There's a thing there I want to mention is that even actually great villains have that. They are self-made and they overcame their own thing, their own background.
Yeah.
But what they lacked, it was that part of say, hey, this is not good. This is hurting other people. This is hurting you on the back end of it, right? In the end. But then, because sometimes, for example, this Luke Skywalker, when he turns evil, I don't know if it's Luke, actually. But I know that there's some point that
It's
someone
his
is
father.
good, and then the villain convinced him to join the dark side and all of this. He overcame his own stuff, became bitter. I'm thinking of also Azula from The Legend of Aang. Great girl, had a great power, great strength, grew up to be a great warrior, right? So what's the difference between her and Aang, who also learned to master stuff and became a great fighter and grew up to be a well-known person? But then Azula is the enemy, is the villain, and then Aang is the hero. So overcoming your own thing is not the hero discriminator, because great villains,
They
also have
their
their
own
rich
shit.
to riches stories. And it doesn't make them any less of a villain. That's what turned them into villains. So heroes need to be something on top of that.
yeah, right.
Because if a hero doesn't have a self growth, then he's not gonna become the hero either. Even if they help people, they're only just this
They go
capable of
together.
doing. They do good things here and there, but they're just good people. They're good villagers, not the hero.
Well,
But good villagers are also heroes.
yeah, because they're keeping a good village. But
Yeah.
the narrative, the Isaiah narrative, is that that's the suffering servant, the hero, absorbs all of our sins are taken upon him. That's actually kind of what it says. He takes on our iniquities, our badness, absorbed into him. So when you have a hero that ends up being narcissistic, none of that happened.
Mm-hmm.
They're just doing it for a reason of recognition. The hero actually does die, and he takes on the iniquities, the badness of humanity into himself, herself, itself. It's Lilo's sister. Doesn't get recognized. Doesn't even have to, it's fighting against the system. So her little sister doesn't have to be in a foster home, trying to be that great person that can manage a home of this hyperactive, crazy little girl that's got this alien. So, I mean, it sounds maybe simplistic, but it isn't.
It's not her story, the one we're telling, but I agree she's the hero. And maybe your story is not going to be absorbing humanity's sins or anything,
Yeah.
but working on yourself and at the same time doing that to have a better impact on the people around you. It could be your family. Probably those are not, I believe that there is an entire thing. We believe that heroes, it's the impossible, and somewhat it's just for a few. That it is unachievable. Like, to make that big of a deal also brings a sense of it's not attainable. I have an ordinary life. No. But I believe we can have impact and find meaning even in small groups. We don't have to absorb humanity's things to be our heroes or to have impact or to create meaning and community. So I think that if we change the story, this hero is not the amazing thing. Yeah, they could be considered heroes, but what other ways do we have about them impact? Because consider that the stories that we have available to consume in books and movies, they're about this unique person who had unique qualities and then did a unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't tell stories of a little family, of a guy waking up in the morning being like, happy, cuss. That's a fucking victory over life and over anything.
Yeah.
Where they're like, a guy woke up happy to work now. I just showed the dude who killed a bunch of bastards and then absorbed humanity's thing. Like, no, we don't tell those stories. And because we don't tell those stories, we think that it is okay to wake up unhappy because we're not living in that other narrative.
There's also a thing that I'm getting from this. We need to be, well, I feel like it needs to be said that stories are the results of culture. And it's not necessarily the goal we need to strive for. It's just a description of who we are, right? So it's not that a story happens and then we go after it. We do stuff, things happens, and then we tell stories about it. We represent reality in those stories. And that archetypes is not something that we are just trying to describe, something that we learned about, and then we are trying to go back there. It's just that this is humanity, this is it. Things started to move around and to playing out in some particular way, and then we tell stories about it, right? But it's not necessarily things that we need to go after. And one of those things, in the Jesus story and the Romeo story, why is this guy woke up happy to go to work not a good story, right? Not a story I want to show me the guy who killed a bunch of bastards, right? It's because, and you have described it in your book actually, it's that we want, a good story has a terrible situation and the hero emerges from that, flourishes in spite of all that was against him, right? And I think that in our stories, in our heroes, we also, as a community of viewers, we want the hero to die. It's not just something bad that happened, like in Batman, right? Think of it, it's kind of disappointing that he doesn't die for the people in that story, right? Mm-hmm. They cried over him and, oh, Batman, what a hero. And then it's like, no, I survived. It's like, wow, well, I liked you better when you died for us.
Yeah, right.
Right?
True.
And Jesus, we have the same
in
thing.
that particular story, no one knew he was alive except.
But think of if that happened, right? He needs to remain dead for the people who love him to be a good story. Mm-hmm. And thinking of that, like I'm like, we are morbid about our heroes. We want our heroes, and I think that's a thing in that hero story that's not so good. We want our heroes to die for us, to sacrifice over something. We don't want our heroes to actually live and have a good life. And it's like, well, you did something great for me, and now you deserve a good life. No, if that was not the end of it, then what's the point? Where's the meaning for me? That was just something you did on a good Sunday for me, and it's not such a big thing, right? Jesus died over us, but if that was one of the things that he did in his life, and then he did another bunch of things, it's sort of less meaningful then, right? It's not just our Savior; it's our Savior and this and that. It's like, well, it's cool that he's our Savior, but why is it not something more meaningful? And I think that's something portrayed also in the narrative of the hero. We want the sacrifice. We want our hero to be. We want that thing that the hero did for the people he had an impact on. They had an impact on. To be the greatest thing they ever do.
Yeah, and
that doesn't happen if they keep on living.
That's right, and you want those people to be the resurrection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want them to have a legacy carried on by the rest of them, but not the hero can be telling their own story because that's narcissistic, right? So in a way, I think that's part of why we don't strive hard enough to be a hero, because it's jumping into the unknown that caused me a lot of anxiety. I'm just an ordinary person. I will not have the tools to beat that. And what's the point if for that? And I think that's not part that's not a part that it's told in that. But what's the point of that? I don't want to sacrifice myself for a greater cause. I don't want to die for my family. I don't want to die for my town. I want to be part of that part that takes in the benefits of the hero doing his thing. So there's no real reason to be the hero.
And what if
And
we
I
change
think-
the narrative to together we create, and together we prosper, and together we get to live not out of someone else's sacrifice, but out of collective construction?
I agree. That's why we need to do, and that's why I say that the hero narrative is not necessarily the goal, because that story is just a description of what we strive for, what we want out of life to happen. But I don't think it's necessarily the healthiest or the best possible outcome. The hero narrative is also permeated, and it feeds from our stories, and our stories are just description of things that we think we want, or that we have wanted in the past, that have played out to be good for us, and then we want to go back for that. Our stories of villains and bad stories, terrible things, are the things that we have learned that we don't like, right? But sometimes, if, for example, if you get a shot as a kid, you don't see the ending of that. But if you fixate on that part of the story, vaccines end up being things that you don't want to. Then the archetype of a vaccine is something bad, something that you need to run from, even though in the end it's going to be good for you. So our stories are descriptions of things that we have liked or not liked, not necessarily the good things and the bad things. So I would say that it's...
But our stories also are filled up with trauma.
Exactly.
And our normal person doesn't really handle trauma very well. There's something that heroic has to happen. There's something that has to respond and go, oh, I have cut my leg. I go to a doctor. Not, oh, man, I'm pouring blood out of my leg. I got to do something. Something has to happen. A broken relationship. We got to get counseling. I got to say, I'm sorry. I got to do something here that's self-sacrificing or whatever it is that saves the relationship. So, because trauma happens, somebody dies in my family. Everybody else is crying. Do I cry with them, or do I serve them food, or do I somehow try to comfort them? And which position do I take? Do I take the victim or the hero, or whatever the sacrificial part of yourself is to do to manage that? So.
But that, I think there's something to notice there, that when you mention, so this is what I listened, this is what I heard.
Okay.
Playing out as the hero involves at some point being self-sacrificial, sacrificing something, right? Doing something for the team. And I don't agree with that in the sense that I think I engage more with the conversation of Jani of how about we flourish together? How about I help to my community to heal, and as part of that community, I will be healed as well. Okay. Or I need to heal myself in order to help the community, or the community as part of that self-healing.
Are you playing the part of the person who mitigates or lessens the trauma, like the chances of trauma happening? Because trauma happens, even to communities.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing.
Trauma will happen. Shit will happen. What I think Dave's take is socially, and that start with someone, and then with another someone, and then a bunch of someones, right? To generate change. But what if we change the narrative as if shit happens and life is horrible? Because we have to do a self process, because community right now is saying life sucks. So it's an inner thing, an inner experience when we find meaning on our own. Now, what if we start changing the conversation, and instead of life sucks and then you deal with it on your own, what it would change the narrative to, hey, shit happens, but we're going to have tools to deal with it when it happens. And for example, a relationship, you can do a lot of work to process that it got broken on your own, but we are not necessarily, and you change from relationship to relationship doing the exact same thing. What if we were taught your current relationship? I believe this is something that we have discussed. This relationship that we are having, it's gonna end, and we can have a next relationship with somebody else or with ourselves. Like that thing of recreating your environment is something that we are not taught, not even as a possibility. So the fact that this one has an expiration date, we don't know where it is, and when that day is there, like, are we gonna create a brand new one? Not necessarily with someone else, but with ourselves. The fact that conflict can be approached in a healthy way, it doesn't make it less traumatic or less horrible, but you have tools to address it.
Right.
And it's not gonna prevent future trauma. But the part that I want to stress there, on top of that, is that it's not a self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
It doesn't involve sacrifice. Why doing something good for the other part
It's a sacrifice.
equals me listening, or giving up something, or sacrificing. It's not part of that. I think that if, for example, in this, think of this interaction, right? A possible reading to it is Eric sacrificed his evening. He could have been working or something, watching a movie, sleeping. Instead, he's having to engage in this conversation with this part of soccer, and he doesn't know when they're leaving. On top of that, he had to put food from his own to feed them, right? And go buy some Coke so they could have something to drink, right? It sounds like a huge sacrifice. Do you perceive this conversation as like a sacrifice?
I mean, some people would. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it is
Or-
a possible reading.
For me, it's like, okay, these people are kind of coming over, and I'm grateful. How do I show my gratitude?
Exactly.
So
You see?
it's even saying thank you is saying thank you a sacrifice? Is it
I don't
offering?
think so.
Is it offering something that's selfless? Is it offering myself to you? Not even as a sacrifice. It is offering myself.
It is offering, but it is not a sacrifice. And I think that that's
Well,
the way
then
you talk
there's
about
An
it.
important
there's got to
distinction.
be a conversation about what sacrifice really is.
Yes.
Because even though Jesus sacrificed his life in the Bible, it actually says, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Did he suffer and die? Maybe, but that was our interpretation of it.
Yes.
But in the interpretation, the experience of Christ, for him wasn't that at all. Who for the joy set before him endured the cross. He knew that there was something bigger that he was going to have to attain to for the freedom or the absorption or something to happen for humanity, that there was a joy in that. It's just like, oh, wow, could be a sacrifice. Damn it, I got to go get a 2-liter bottle of Coke. Oh, they're going to be eating my pizza, blah, 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 whatever it is. It's the joy, like, wow.
Yeah.
There's nothing to endure here, obviously,
Yeah.
besides being full, whatever that is, right? But I think that if we can maintain some type of sort of relationship to gratitude, I think that is the key
Yes.
to every community actually working, because then nothing occurs as like in my life of gratitude and practicing gratitude, when shit happens, I don't notice it. It's like, oh, that happened. And I was grateful for whatever my context was. So it was either minimal or I didn't even notice it.
Mhm.
Or because of I actually been using the 6+1
Mhm.
as a getting myself out of the gutter type of thing. Like whenever
Yeah.
something is very overwhelming, like bad, and I need to place myself in the current moment, there's that. We believe that when that happens, we're so stressed or in so much pain or so frustrated that we see that as everything. And the 6+1 helps you gain perspective by that's one big thing, but here you have 6+1 that,
Mhm.
in terms of quantity, you have yourself in the correct moment and to exercise that gratitude. I believe we should again, engage in the discussion of a narrative in which is not grateful individuals who are happy, but maybe we can start talking about grateful communities, grateful companies,
Mhm.
grateful families. And speaking of gratitude, not as a one thing that was born out of sacrifice, but as a contagious type of virus.
If you have any inkling that socialism could work, only in the context of gratitude. Because if you have gratitude, socialism happens.
Yeah.
It isn't like, let's legalize it. It happens. Marxism happens, or whatever it is that you think happens inside of communism. It happens because you got gratitude and everybody wants to give their stuff to each other. You know, everybody wants to just like, wow, this is great. For me in my practice of gratitude, there's been my experience is fortunate. Mm-hmm. Like I'm so lucky to be here. Never close that door. No bugs, 1 or 2 a year. I mean, compared to Texas, we'd be having to spray ourselves all over the place with everything right now. And to even have this, it'd be too cold in the United States right now. And in the summertime, it'd be way too hot. I have to find out I got to get an air conditioner. You know, whatever it is, I just have a lot of gratitude that makes me feel so fortunate that suffering doesn't even occur as suffering. Mm-hmm. It often occurs to me as the unknown to go explore.
You see?
To launch into, because I'm grateful
totally
I have
with
such
that.
right.
I think I just remembered it from Gatsby. Said you learn from the part of the story you focus on.
Yeah.
That everything that we mentioned, right? Like the highs and lows that you have here in Medellin are also part of the reality. But that's not the part of your story you focus on. And you said something that I feel was very important is they occurred to me as the unknown, as the go-to, or I just didn't notice them or they didn't happen because you didn't focus on them. So think of you're having, as in the example that I placed here, right? You could focus on the things that you have to do for it to happen, or you could think on this conversation, right? And engage and see, wow, this was so cool. Well, for me, it is, right? Because I'm learning a lot of experience this moment and this nice weather in December, right? So this for me is good, even though we had to, after we walked in the whole morning, we could have been sleeping in our home and not going out again. You focus on different parts of the story and then you get different results. You focus on the things you gain.
If we were to focus on I'm too tired, horrible interaction. If you focus on the excitement of what I could get there, what I could learn, it changes perspective.
Exactly. And that's when you get to be thankful. I think that's the point. You put it just precisely. When you're grateful, you're more able to approach life and enjoy life, because grateful puts the focus on the good things.
Yeah.
You need to actually do an exercise of turning the camera into the good things to find what's out there in my life to be thankful about. And just that helps you keep the focus on the good things, right? And it gives you a happy life. I think that's how gratitude is the key, is that it puts you, and the 6+1 is a big part of it. It puts you, it compels you to put energy into focusing on the good things.
Gratitude is the key to expansion.
Yeah.
And expansion being that it opens the door to the unknown, up to the unknown, up to the unknown. And within those levels, you start finding things in that present moment to be thankful for. So you're not scared that you need to go through another door. You're like, fuck yeah, there's another door. Let's engage.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a section in my gratitude part that actually talks about one of the impacts of gratitude is intimacy and sexuality. Because inside of gratitude, there's the freedom to trust and explore more parts of what that relationship is. And it can happen on an enterprise level, which is weird that intimacy and sexuality would be front. But there's the trust and the like what you said, unlocking doors.
There is this, I love that you touched that point, because there's this author that I absolutely adore. Her name is Esther Perel. She's a psychotherapist, and for 30 years, she was dedicating to couples therapy, eroticism. She says sex is part of eroticism, but eroticism is way bigger than sex. So, and one day she started doing organizational psychology, and everybody was like, what the fuck? Don't you do couples therapy?
Organizational sex?
Yeah, working with enterprises and stuff.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, how? And she's like, it's exactly the same in structure.
Mm-hmm.
You need to feel safe enough to be able to explore in sexuality, for instance, or to have an erotic mind and an erotic life.
Yeah.
And she developed this concept of erotic intelligence. And
Oh.
people were like, what's erotic intelligence?
On an organizational level.
On an organizational level.
Wow.
And she's like, because eroticism is rather than sex, we can talk about erotic intelligence in other environments.
Mm.
Erotic intelligence is feeling safe enough to deal with the unknown, understand new things, explore, be crazy, use the power of imagination. And aren't we talking in enterprises of being more creative and saying ideas and having this inner confidence when you can make mistakes? Because that's how feeling safe enough is also having the liberty that when you're gonna be when you make mistakes, you're not gonna be blamed, but that you're gonna be like taken into a more constructive place. I was talking to my team the other day, telling them like, if you think when you make a mistake, I want you to take responsibility, but not to feel guilty, because guilt brings pain and it has excuses attached to it. So if they feel they're going to be blamed, they're like, no, I'm not guilty. No, I didn't do it. But if we have a solution-oriented culture, yes, I take responsibility. We learn from whatever it is that happens so that we can solve it, not just for this particular thing, but in the future, for it not to happen with other client in a scenario that may repeat itself. So erotic intelligence is the ability to imagine yourself in a different way, to put your story differently, to create new narratives, to be able to feel safe enough so that you can play. And that happens in sex, and that happens at work, and it happens in every aspect of our life, erotic intelligence. So when you make the comparison between sex and enterprises, I was like, yeah, that's what Perel did.
There's a new paradigm that's showing up in specifically this age of social media, which is beyond tragic. It's like the evil that can't be spoken of. Complaining and blaming since Adam. The first 5 words out of Adam's mouth was, that woman you gave me. Complaint, blame.
Yeah.
The children of Israel, 40 years in the desert that should have taken them 11 days to cross, was all about complaining and then the consequences of complaining. And idols created, whatever it is. It was that it's just we know how to complain and blame every day. Our dialogue does this 24 hours a day. Well, every time, most even our dreams. But what's new, not really, it's kind of new, and I think the media did it first, but I'm not really sure, is shaming. Mm-hmm. Shaming, it's just like the cancel culture, whatever. I mean, I'm embarrassed that while the policies of the current President Trump, have been policies that I adore, I believe in, to start making a difference in the Middle East, to start bringing jobs back to the United States, to start bringing some pride back into the country that says, wow, we can actually be a leader instead of apologizing all the time and giving all of our money away. We can actually be a leader and help other people be more prosperous. Because when America is prosperous, boom, the world is prosperous. But that person is so proficient, especially in the debates. And the only reason why he won the debates to begin with was because he was so much higher level of shaming people, calling them names. Everybody that he didn't like, he has a name for. And he did that with his reality TV stuff. And it caught on. And now what it did kind of was expose that the media has been doing that for 40 years. And then we have this thing called social media where that's all we do. And Twitter is all it is shaming people. So in the context of this erotic intelligence, you got to have the trust to know that you can actually go forward. Yet you've got this element, this paradigm almost in this social media culture that is all about responding to this thing called shaming, which it isn't necessarily a new thing, but it's so prevalent in the world culture just because you got Twitter or just because you got Instagram or just because you hope you get likes for this or that or subscribers. So I don't know how that fits. I mean,
how that fits in the world of social media. I believe content. Like we learn from the part of the story that we focus on. We learn from the narrative that we focus on. So if you're going to create your content or your engagement strategies based on shaming because it spreads like a virus, how about you create a culture of gratitude that can also spread like a virus?
Yeah.
So you can get followers and you can get your message across by doing shaming, or you can do it by exercising gratitude. So it's our choice. At the end of the day, it comes down to a choice. Why do we choose shaming instead of gratitude? Because we're constantly reacting. We're not deciding.
Well, it's partly that, but humans love drama. And
it's a decision to continue to like drama or to find another way to enjoy life that is not through drama.
I did an audio of my first part of my second book. And it was just talking about Riley's Eden. And just because I did that, I had this troll come up on my YouTube that says, you know, none of what you're talking about has any validity because you believe in something that promotes slavery. And then and he kind of presented himself like he was an intellectual, but he was just really trying to do the shaming part of whatever he didn't agree with my particular take. And it wasn't just, hey, I don't agree. No, blah, 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 and you're this and you're this. It's like attacking me personally. Well, yeah, you can put that out there. And the context was, this is about gratitude and about, you know, bettering your life. But if you got people that can only respond with such with vicious type of hate, then that they're out there, you know, you just can't. You know
what stuff? It's also a decision to let that. I was gonna say get to you. The thing is that it's again back to the culture thing, debate. It's different. This is a constructive conversation, and see that we don't agree on anything, but nobody's shaming anyone in here. So the thing is that we're taught that because we have freedom of speech, we can be total cunts. No, like there has to be some ethical principles on expressing disagreement without harming the other person. And whatever hurt from what he said, I see that if it were to me, I'm not saying it has to be like that for you, but if I were to read that, it would be an alarm, like a little notification in my brain phone being like, if this makes you uncomfortable, what part of this situation, what is signaling? What do you still have to heal for this not to hurt? How can I respond to this guy with kindness?
Yeah, and that's what I did. I actually was responding to him, but it was obviously that person was not mentally with it and just wanted to
get it out.
Right, and keep getting it out. And guy kept coming back to me no matter what I said, and I said, then you let go. I just didn't respond, and then he actually responded back to me and said, "Did I hurt you? You know, it's just am I?" And I said, "Well, you're kind of being a troll. You know, this is the way this works." He goes, "Well, I'm not a troll. Well, look at the things you said, and don't you think that this is something that an internet troll would do?" And then he answered again, but I just didn't apply. I just didn't respond to him anymore. It's like, there's only so much you can do. It's like, okay. If something happens and the book becomes actually popular and I'm having to deal with 3,000 of these guys a day just because they don't like what I said, I am not going to be a happy person. I'm not going to be full of gratitude. I'm going to be like, I'm responding to the worst part about humanity that's available, and they're all on the internet. It's like, oh.
But maybe they are the ones who are the most vocal. Probably the people who are actually impacted by it don't necessarily share it because they feel vulnerable just to bear.
And I get that the cancel culture is the cancel culture for a reason. They want to fight. They want to know that what they believe in is true. And they want you to tell them that. But it sure doesn't look like they do.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks for this conversation. Has been huge. I would love for the world to hear it. And as much as background stuff, I don't even know if it's a good recording, but this is just so fascinating. You guys are fucking brilliant. And I really appreciate the time. Did you have something besides the lollipop that you wanted to say? look like you're about ready to.
No.
I've been looking at them for a while now. It's like,
Good. That's one of the onesy people on the street that you normally say gracias, but you actually give them something. And
we were talking about it like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. We went out and this person was offering something like candies on the street and I say gracias. And then Dave remembered, hey, Eric says this thing about gracias and gratitude, and then we started talking about that. And you said gracias to me when I say it, it's not necessarily get away. It's thank you for having the balls of doing what you're doing and sending up to people. It's more acknowledgement than get the fuck off.
well, we're not getting our feelings across. We're just yelling at each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we need to have conversations instead of debate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's a part of it that I doesn't quite completely get my head around because we do need debate. I think there's nothing constructive. Well, not nothing. Let me rephrase that. I think it's not the end of it, just getting it out and having ideas, because part of debate, well, as I have understood the differentiation that you make between conversations and debate, as we're having debate, but we should be having conversations, is debate is saying I agree with you or I don't agree with you, and conversations is I'm presenting what I understand from what you say. First, this is what I understood from what you said. This is what I think about it. I'm not trying to say that you're wrong, that I'm right, or that I'm wrong, whatever. That would be weird. Saying that, hey, this is what I think and I'm wrong. But in the end, if you only have conversations...
Because you're seeing conversations as acknowledging only. And conversations can be staged for decision making as well. It's just that there is a not. Right? We don't agree on something, whatever the fuck that is. Then we use that dynamic of listening, restating, presenting. We do that for a while, and then we get to a point where decisions need to be made and negotiations need to take place. Now, what happens with debate is that you jump into decisions without even understanding background, like fucking zero empathy. So the problem with debate is that you haven't finished talking and I'm already thinking of my answer. So I'm not really listening. I'm just like respecting the time and space where you're gonna talk so that I can get back at it. While real conversations, they prepare the ground for more thoughtful, empathetic decisions to be made, for common grounds to be found, for a co-construction to be built. So that's what I mean. Not just to say the restating and the acknowledgement, that has to take part, but in order to lead for more thoughtful decisions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was missing that bit of it because I was stuck on, well, I can know what you come from. I can understand. Now you know where I come from. But in the end,
where do we meet?
Where do we meet? Exactly, because I can do that with a wall and show my feelings, sort of understand why it's not responding to me because it's a wall in the end of the day. But yeah, but it didn't build anything out of that.
I think
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the foundations that need to be, but the house needs to be built, which is the agreement or disagreement and building on top of that.
And it can't. Entitlement is the problem. That I'm entitled to my opinion and you're entitled to my opinion.
And then we don't meet.
Yeah, exactly. So it's entitlement versus grace. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to approach a conversation with grace, the entitlement won't be involved with, and there still can be rigorous conversations because I'm not going to convince you. I'm not entitled for you to be convinced of my point of view, even though I have a point of view.
I believe there is a distinction and this is going to sound crazy because of the meaning that you have attached to the word entitlement, but I believe there's a form of healthy entitlement as well.
Okay, I want to know.
For example, I am entitled to be treated with respect, for instance. Mm-hmm. So in a relationship, let's say, whether that is at work, with a partner, or with everything, we engage in a conversation to me, and I'm like, you are not entitled to agree with me on everything, but I am entitled to, for example, be safe for example, in a relationship where I'm not necessarily like physically abused. I'm entitled not to be physically abused. So that's a healthy type of entitlement. So if we're trying to heal our relationship where that is present and there's no way we can negotiate for that, then you're not entitled to stay with me. I'm not entitled to stay with you, but I'm entitled to safety.
Right.
So I'm walking away.
Yeah. Now, if you feel safe, will you feel entitlement to safety? I don't know that, because just like the erotic intelligence it requires a context of safety for it to move forward. Now, do I have to come into a conversation that says, okay, I'm entitled to safety because this is so you got to make me feel safe? Or is that created in the context of...
It depends on who you put the responsibility for. For example, I believe that I'm responsible. I believe I'm entitled to happiness, but I also believe that I'm responsible for it.
Yeah.
It's not other people's fault. It is mine.
Yeah.
So it's a responsibility that I owe to myself and to others to be happy.
Right.
So look at...
There's a difference. You're right. Because there's the entitled, which is derecho, right? There is the entitlement part, which is true. The rights exist for you to be able to, be accepted, for you to be whatever it is in a certain situation. And then there's deserving.
You know what? And this is like very, very personal, but like, again, language. And because of sexual trauma, I felt that I was not entitled to feel pleasure. Like it reminded me back to trauma.
Right.
So feeling entitled that I am entitled to also feel pleasure, and that's not a bad thing, and that I'm responsible for my own pleasure, that creates accountability rather than guilt. So if I feel pleasure, I no longer feel like remorse that I'm such a horrible person, but I actually feel that it's something that I deserve, and I'm responsible for creating it. So that is what I call healthy entitlement.
Yeah, I totally get that. Now the word deserve is a little stronger concept because that's what Eve did. That's what the snake did to Eve. You deserve, even though it was kind of entitlement. I just wrap it around this thing called entitlement. But I agree with you totally that there's something a little bit more insidious about deserving. I deserve for you to hear my opinion, and that doesn't mean that you deserve to hear my opinion. That I deserve, that you deserve to have your opinion heard. Yeah. It all goes my way, not your way.
Exactly.
So there's got to be that give and take inside of a conversation. That's, that's the reason I invited you specifically, is because I knew that there wouldn't be a blanket agreement on things. Now there'd be a space for you to listen, because that's what you do, like with an incredible level of genius, is that for some reason, that thing in your body brings out a lot of creativity in my speaking, and a lot of principles or concepts that I can't really have, of course, even with my other friends that I talk to on this planet. So that's appreciated. And I know that you're not going to agree with me on things, which is perfect, because you're not like the shadow of my mind going blah, blah, blah. It's someone I can actually bounce off conversations, and you're going to have a different opinion. So that's great. And you too, you as well. I mean, you bring that totally into the space, which I knew you would, just because I've had a conversation with you before, but not in my place.
Yeah.
So have you ever been here before?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, welcome anytime. So
Thanks.
Great. Yeah. So anyway, more of what you're saying.
Well, thanks for that appreciation. Really appreciate the appreciation.
There's something really powerful in the concept of acknowledgement. When you can acknowledge people, you create their world for them. Like, you've been this way all along, but you don't know that that's your special power.
Yeah.
Until someone says, you know where your special power is?
Yeah.
No, kind of, but not really. Then you say it, and it's like they live into it from going on out. Wow, you're a great singer. Okay. I didn't know that. Just my mom told me. I didn't know anybody else liked it. Okay, boom. Let's start doing more of that. It was I don't know how.
You're a great listener, Dave.
Yeah. So it's in the listening that language happens. Well, language wouldn't happen in just language. There's got to be the listening of it. Even in, I don't know, I think the language is so strong that things will listen no matter what. Just like God saying, let there be light. There didn't have to be something out there to say, receive I got to listen to this and then I got to respond. It's just, language is so powerful that it just creates. And then there's language that has to land in the listening of another person. Like when we confess that this happened in the past, it's more important for us to know that there's someone else that got that communication, that hears my trauma, hears my pain, and can respond to it, or at least embrace it. Like, give me the evil, give me the pain, give me the sins of the world and put them into me. You're being the hero in the moment. So let's let me make you the hero by listening to me and giving you my pain, that kind of thing, or whatever it is. Important. I want to do this again.
It comes back to what you were saying. I think that's a point that we never explored on entitlement, because we sort of assumed, and that's where I feel that we were stuck until you mentioned the healthy entitlement and where's the difference, right? Because we can agree that it exists. We could agree that it exists, but how do we differentiate it from the non-healthy entitlement, for just the entitlement that we had, right? And that you have described in the book and we have talked about. So
I think from recognizing that healthy entitlement acknowledges that there is also that other people are entitled to the same things. For instance, if I am entitled to pleasure, but my pleasure goes against yours, unhealthy entitlement. I'm only taking myself into account. So if I'm entitled to pleasure, but you are entitled to pleasure too, then it becomes a construction that there is consent, then it's cared for the other.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that that's a part, but that's not all of it. And not even the most important part.
What would you say is the most important?
It's what you put as responsibility.
Yeah.
Entitlement is I am entitled of your attention, means that there's something that I deserve, but it's your responsibility to give it to me. And I think we sort of explored that once. I remember the conversation, but we never sort of put a name to it, which is I am entitled of money. But in that comes, there's the responsibility on the world to give me money, to make me rich, right? Instead of I am entitled to money, so it is my responsibility. If I feel that I'm entitled to that, it is my responsibility to go after it.
And the same thing as being entitled to have you hear me, is I got to have something that's worthy of hearing, and it's got to be in your language, or a language you understand. I'm so fortunate you guys know English, because you could be speaking Spanish and it'd be great, and I could be on my head, but I wouldn't understand any of it, so I wouldn't listen to any of it. And there would be no attention because I wouldn't understand any of it, because you're not generating a conversation that lands over here like something that has value.
You're talking where you're not communicating.
Exactly. Same thing with that making money. Okay, I can do this and you can give me money, or I can be doing this and generate whatever person that I need to be for you to give me money to do the things that you like to have done, or whatever on the team, or whatever.
It's where you place that responsibility. If it's my responsibility, so as you put it, you put it very nicely, as I'm entitled to pleasure, and it's my responsibility to feel that pleasure. So, for example, in the point of the example of the abusing relationship, right? Physical abuse. And then it's like, I am entitled to safety. And I think you said something, I don't know if you did say it, but this is what I heard, is, so you need to make me feel safe. And I think that's where it divides from healthy entitlement to non-healthy entitlement. And non-healthy in this case is naive entitlement of you. It's your responsibility to make me feel safe. You're not gonna, so I'm just gonna die, right? So
it's my responsibility.
It is my responsibility
to take myself away.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where it becomes healthy entitlement. I'm entitled to feel safe. It is not your responsibility to make me feel safe. It is my responsibility to ensure that I'm in an environment that provides that for me.
Yeah.
If you can be that, then great. I can stay here. If you're not gonna be that, if you're gonna go against that directly, then a part of my responsibility is knowing that it is my responsibility to go away from that.
Well, I could have invited you to my house with snakes all over the floor. would you feel safe enough to have an open conversation?
Hell no.
No, hell no, right?
Maybe about the snakes.
And it would be your responsibility to go, see you later, Eric, and run as fast as you can.
Exactly. It's not a thing of, you had snakes in your place. How could you? It's like, well, it's your place. Why were you there?
Yeah.
Why did you come in? And after, if you didn't know, why didn't you leave? So it's where you place the responsibility is the key between
Healthy
entitlement,
and non-healthy.
just entitlement and healthy entitlement. Well, yeah, now that we have two, well, unhealthy entitlement, which is just the entitlement. I remember translating the first chapters when you present entitlement and you explain what it is. And I think it gets assumed, but it's never said that entitlement comes, I mean, it has a second part to it. I'm entitled to this, and it immediately means that you are responsible to give it to me. That's when it is what you described in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm entitled to this, and it's my responsibility to do it. It just makes sense. It's like,
It's accountability.
okay.
That's
Well,
it.
yeah, you
That's,
can go after it.
Right.
Now,
That's social. That's like a safe entitlement. That's what,
yeah, and that's just how we expect the world to work. It's like, well, you want that, go after it. Right. So, and that connects to something that you mentioned also a while ago. Again, I'm just going over parts of the conversation that got my attention. When you said knowing how to deal with things and to be better as a society, to live in a society of gratitude, it's not going to prevent trauma from happening. It's just going to give us the tools to deal with that.
To overcome it.
Was it like that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that responsibility is just knowing that you need to learn how to deal with the things that already happened to you. But it also means that in the future, you're going to have to put in the works, put the tools that you already learned to deal with the past thing and to resolving future stuff. Future stuff involves things that you already that are going to look like that and things that have nothing to do with that. So that's going to happen. You're not going to know how to deal with that. Maybe you're going to know how to deal with a bit of it, right? And then you got to learn, it's part of your responsibility to learn how to deal with the whole thing. Then you will have more tools. And then it's going to be less likely that what's coming, it's going to overwhelm you because at least you're going to know how to deal with 10% of it. And then you learn how to move through that. And I think that's how you grow. And that's how you become useful to the rest.
The problem is not conflict. Like think of a conflict situation that you have had. When we're able to solve conflict, that brings us closer together. Well, when we don't, that just keeps us further apart. You said that about your relationship. Like whenever you have had bumps, you know that you can count on the two of you to put a little bit of like your vulnerability and effort and intention into fixing things. Where if you're like, okay, F it and bye, then that creates more conflict because it piles up. So conflict resolution also comes with a language and with a vocabulary. And if we are taught that shit is gonna happen, but that we have everything that it takes and that our community has everything that it takes to overcome conflict, that spreads gratitude because you're bonding.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And you're gonna grow in the process because conflict is never gonna stop coming, thank God. So you will always have opportunities to grow.
I literally get paid to fix problems.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
That's it. And that's changed my perspective so much because usually we're like, oh, something else happened, or this problem, or this client, or this person. And I'm like, if everything were running perfectly, I would be out of a job.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's brilliant.
So I'm grateful that I have issues to solve because that's what I'm getting paid for.
So it's kind of like life works best when shit happens because that's how life works.
If you have the ability and the tools to solve conflict.
Right.
If you feel like it's your responsibility in the first place to solve it. Because if you don't feel like you have to solve anything,
for the government to fix it.
There's nothing wrong with not having the tools and not approaching that conflict because it's not my deal. It has nothing to do with me. Even though I am part of that because I'm aware of it. I might not feel like I have a part of it on fixing it. right? So maybe I caused it, but it's not my thing to fix it. So I don't need to have the tools for that. And I can just push and put the blame on other people, shaming them for not fixing it, not being accountable myself, and I'm entitled for you to fix it quickly and nicely, right? So that's where it comes. When you don't put the responsibility on yourself for the part that's yours, because that's another part of it.
Taking responsibility for everybody.
It's not just taking the blame for everything, and that's where I see that the archetype of the hero is failing. We want the hero to be accountable for just everything and anything, and to have the tools to fix it, and for us to be the recipients of that.
Right.
But there's a part on every one of us to do something with that.
Right.
To provide the hero with the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
If the hero didn't have an environment that provided them with the tools, with the growing, with the, hey, you're being a jerk, you need to learn these things, mentor the hero for the skills that they will need to have. If Alita didn't have the doctor to give her a body in the first place, she wouldn't be able to find the second body, right?
Or if Aladdin didn't have the genie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's always, it's not just the hero. It's us as surrounders of the hero, and us as the hero of our own stories to receive what comes and works. And not focus on the parts that come and hurts us, or wants to defeat us, right? Because there's always gonna be a villain, and not necessarily a figure of a villain, not necessarily an unspeakable of evil, but just conflict, right? And I think that's important as well. Like, responsibility is just not fixing everything and being accountable for everything. It's knowing what you can do, being accountable for the things that you actually did, and understanding that at some point, there's some point on which somebody else needs to be responsible for their own things.
Yeah.
Because, and I learned this from you, actually, from watching you, because you usually go over responsible of, I need to fix this. That person needs to do something. They're in their own process. They're not gonna take responsibility for me, so I'm gonna fix it. And this person as well. And you start growing so wide that you can't hold anything, and you end up not fixing anything. So I feel like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Like, I don't have a wrap up for that. I just think.
I think that our CEO was speaking. And we were doing a gratitude exercise for Thanksgiving. So she hired the psychologist that, did a series of activities to incentivize and generate gratitude. And at the end, when she was closing, she said, we usually say the company is great, or the company lacks solid processes, the company this, the company that. And then she went and she asked, and who is the company? The company's us. If processes are not going well, we are the ones to fix it, not some weird entity called company. The company, it's us. So I believe that also generates collective accountability and collective responsibility.
Yeah, right. Be another conversation that
I
might
love
happen.
it.
So.
Actually took notes.
Did ya?
Yeah, for next time.
Yeah, good. And I might actually post this. I'm not even sure if it's going to end up being good. I'll have to run it through several processors to try to knock out some of the ambient noise. And it's not like everybody's on a microphone for real podcasts, even though I might have that for next time. I'm not sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah, I do appreciate this very much. So,
Me too.
Yeah, has it been good for you guys?
Yes.
And knowing that I was under pressure to invite you guys to actually generate a conversation that was engaging for you guys to respond was not really pressure, but I had to create the space for that. And you guys had to choose, am I going to come into this place? Is it going to be a den of snakes? Or am I going to get accused of anything? Or am I going to be listened to?
Yeah.
So, that's.
Thank you for offering a safe space to build up a dialogue.
I'm going to turn this off.